The rain came down hard on the small town that night. The sound of thunder rolled over the hills while lightning flashed above the dark highway. Ethan Cole locked the doors of his auto repair shop and pulled his old jacket tight around himself. He could hear the water running down the tin roof of the garage and smell the mix of oil and wet dust. He was tired, but ready to go home to his little girl, Lily, who would be waiting with her drawings and stories before bed. As he turned off the lights, he heard a strange noise from the road. It was a squeal of tires followed by a dull thud. Ethan dropped his keys and ran outside. Through the heavy rain, he saw a dark car stopped at an odd angle in front of the shop. One headlight had gone out, and the windshield wipers were beating fast. He ran up to the car and knocked on the window. Inside, a woman was slumped forward against the steering wheel. Her face was pale and her lips were blue. Ethan quickly opened the door. The woman's pulse was weak. He looked around for help, but the street was empty. He remembered the first aid training he had taken long ago when his wife was still alive. He laid the woman on the cold ground. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. He placed his palms on her chest and began pressing down in rhythm, counting out loud to keep steady. The rain soaked through his jacket, but he did not stop. Lightning flashed again, showing his face full of focus and hope. He prayed that she would breathe again. After several long moments, she gasped and coughed weakly. Relief flooded him. He lifted her head and spoke softly, telling her that help would come soon. A passing car slowed down when the driver saw the scene. Ethan shouted for help and the driver called for an ambulance. Ethan kept talking to the woman, telling her to stay awake. She looked at him with wide eyes, confused and in pain, and tried to speak. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "You're safe now. Just breathe." He reached for a blanket from the back of his truck and covered her trembling body. The sound of sirens broke through the rain, and red lights flashed from the corner of the street. The paramedics rushed over, took over the care, and thanked Ethan for saving her life. They lifted her onto a stretcher and placed her in the ambulance. Ethan watched as the doors closed. He did not even know her name. He was soaked from head to toe, his arms heavy and shaking. But inside his chest, he felt both fear and something warm, a quiet joy that he had been there at the right time. When the ambulance drove away, he stood in the rain for a long moment, breathing hard, letting the storm wash the grease and sweat from his skin. Later that night, when Ethan reached home, he found Lily asleep on the couch with a book in her hand. The soft light from the lamp made her curls glow like gold. He smiled tiredly and brushed her hair from her forehead. He sat beside her and watched her small chest rise and fall. His small house was simple but warm, filled with the smell of soup from dinner and the sounds of the rain on the windows. The world outside was cold, but this little place always carried peace. He moved to the kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. His hands were still trembling. He thought of the woman again. Her face had been fine and strong even in that helpless moment. Her car had been a luxury model, the kind he had never fixed before, sleek and shining under the storm. She must have been someone important, or at least someone from a different world than his. Yet out there in the rain, all that mattered was that she was a person who needed help. Ethan leaned back in his chair. The clock ticked slowly on the wall. He was proud that he had helped, but a deep worry lingered. What if she did not make it? He tried to shake off the thought and told himself to believe she would recover. He whispered a small prayer for the stranger he had saved. Lily stirred in her sleep and murmured, calling for her dad. Ethan went to her, lifted her up, and carried her to her little bed. He tucked her in and kissed her forehead. When he finally lay down, the sound of the rain eased his mind. He did not know that his life had just changed forever. He did not know that the woman he saved was not just a stranger, but someone whose world was about to crash into his in ways he could never imagine. He only felt a deep calm, unaware that the act of courage he had shown would soon open a door to a story of love, truth, and second chances. Claire Donovan woke to the steady beeping of hospital machines and the soft glow of early morning light pushing through white curtains. For a moment she did not know where she was. Her chest hurt, her throat was dry, and her thoughts were cloudy. Then she remembered the sudden pain, the sharp fear that had gripped her while driving. The sound of rain hitting the car roof, and then darkness. The nurse smiled and told her she was lucky that someone had helped her before the ambulance came. Over the next few days, Claire learned what had happened. The nurse told her a local mechanic named Ethan Cole had saved her life by performing CPR in the rain. Claire tried to picture his face through her memory. Faint shapes under lightning flashes and the sound of his voice telling her to breathe. She asked if anyone had thanked him, but the nurse said he had refused to give full details or wait for recognition. He had only made sure she was safe before returning to his garage. Claire felt both grateful and puzzled. In her world, people rarely helped without expecting something in return. She was a name that filled business magazines, the head of Donovan Industries, a company that dealt with high technology and clean energy. Yet in this tiny town, someone had saved her without knowing or caring who she was. That thought kept her awake at night even more than the pain in her ribs. She kept seeing a flash of worn hands pressing on her chest and hearing his calm voice over the storm. When she left the hospital, she avoided reporters. Her assistant, Nora, drove her quietly to her home outside the city, where the tall windows looked out over a lake surrounded by trees. The silence there usually gave Claire peace, but this time it made her restless. She told Nora to find the mechanic who had saved her. Nora searched and finally brought back the name and address of Ethan Cole's small repair shop. Claire wrote a letter of thanks and added a check large enough to cover months of living costs. She told Nora to deliver it discreetly and not mention her real position in the company. She wanted to help him, not make him feel uncomfortable. When Nora returned the next day, she handed the letter and the check back. Ethan had refused to take it. He said a simple thank you was enough, and that helping someone in trouble was just what people should do. Claire stared at his words, written in neat handwriting on the note card she had sent. For a long time she sat without speaking. It felt strange and deeply moving that he did not want anything from her. She whispered his name softly, tasting it like a promise. The following days, Claire went back to work. The office stood high above the city, full of bright screens and sharp suits. Meetings filled every hour. Her employees avoided mentioning her hospital stay since she had ordered silence about it. As she listened to reports and plans, she found herself looking out of the large window more often than usual. Her mind wandered to that rainy town, the smell of motor oil, and the face she could not completely remember. She realized that the man who had saved her was part of a simpler world that she had long forgotten. At night, when she was alone, she thought about what might have happened if he had not been there. She thought about how easily life could end and how little her money or status could do in that moment. The idea shook something inside her. She began to question why she had worked so long and so hard that she had forgotten small kindness. She wondered what kind of person Ethan really was beyond that quiet bravery. A week after returning to work, she took a weekend off, something she rarely did. She told Nora she needed fresh air and quiet roads. The weather was sunny but cool when she drove out of the city toward the little town. She remembered the road where her car had stopped, the faint marks still visible on the asphalt. She slowed down in front of a small auto garage with a clean but simple sign that read Cole S. Repairs. She sat inside the car for a few minutes, unsure of what to say when she met him. Through the open shop door, she could see him bent over a car hood, wiping grease from his hands. He looked strong but calm, his movements steady. She could hear laughter from inside and saw a little girl sitting on a stool nearby, humming while drawing on a piece of paper. Claire watched them quietly, feeling something warm rise in her chest. She did not walk in that day. Instead, she promised herself she would come back soon. As she drove away, she looked once more in the mirror. The town was small, yet it carried something genuine that her city buildings never did. She felt drawn back to it, and to the man who had seen her not as a businesswoman or a headline, but simply as a person who needed help. For the first time in years, Claire smiled not because of success or power, but because she felt alive again. The morning sun rose bright over the little town as Ethan pulled open the doors of his shop. The sound of birds and the smell of engine oil filled the air. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked over the small lot, already thinking about the cars waiting for repairs. Lily sat on a stool near the workbench, swinging her legs and humming while coloring. Ethan smiled at her before grabbing his tools and starting to work. Turning his head, he saw a sleek black SUV stop in front of the garage. Something about Claire's warm tone fit naturally into the space. While Ethan worked on the SUV, Claire wandered around the garage, asking questions about the tools and engines. She admitted she knew nothing about cars. Her laughter filled the room when Ethan joked that every car had a soul and it only needed patience to speak. She insisted, smiling, and placed the cash on his desk. Claire told him she lived in New York, that she handled company work and traveled a lot. Ethan talked about small-town life, the joy of fixing things and helping neighbors. He said his dream was to expand the garage one day, maybe teach young people how to work with cars. Claire turned her cup in her hands and said, "That was a good dream." When she looked at him, her heart gave a strange pull. She admired his honesty and calm strength. He did not speak like others she met in her high business circles. He looked at the world with plain truth, without trying to impress anyone. Before leaving, Claire asked Lily if she could visit again. Lily clapped her hands and said she should come for pancakes on Sunday, because her dad made the best ones. Ethan laughed and said they would keep a plate ready. Claire drove away, feeling lighter than she had in years. That Sunday, she returned with a basket of fruit and sat at their small kitchen table. The morning was bright, and Lily was full of energy, showing Claire her toys and pictures. Ethan watched as Claire listened carefully to every story and laughed at every joke. The house felt warm, almost like it had grown larger to fit the joy inside. After breakfast, they walked to the nearby park. The air smelled of pine and sunlight. Ethan pushed Lily on the swing while Claire stood nearby, smiling. She felt safe with them, though a shadow of guilt sat in her chest. She knew she was lying by hiding her full identity. She wanted them to see her as Claire the woman, not Claire the CEO. Each time Ethan met her eyes, she felt the truth pressing harder on her heart. When sunset came, she got ready to leave. Ethan thanked her for visiting and said his daughter already liked her a lot. She smiled, saying she liked both of them too. As she drove away, she looked at them standing by the gate, the wind playing in Lily's hair, Ethan waving goodbye. She realized she did not just feel grateful anymore. Something deeper had begun to grow, something gentle but strong. She whispered softly to herself that she hoped this new start would not break when the truth finally came out. Days turned into weeks, and Claire found herself visiting the little town more and more. Each time she arrived, Lily would run to her car with a smile, and Ethan would give his quiet nod of welcome. Claire never planned those visits, yet her car always seemed to take the same turn toward the garage. The air in that place felt real, warm, and peaceful, so different from the bright steel and glass of her city office. On one of those mornings, Claire and Ethan were fixing an old Jeep together. He showed her how to hold a wrench and how to listen for the sound of an engine that was ready to start. She liked how easily they talked, how his laugh came straight from the heart. Once in a while, their hands brushed, sending a quiet spark through her. Lily would draw nearby or tell stories, her voice filling the space with light. It almost felt like a small family, the kind of life Claire had imagined as a child, but had buried under years of meetings and schedules. Yet every night, after returning to her big house, Claire felt the weight of her secret grow heavier. She wanted to tell Ethan who she really was, but fear always stopped her. She was afraid he would look at her differently if he found out she was a billionaire CEO. Around him, she was just Claire, a woman who liked old cars and pancakes. She did not want to lose that. Ethan had begun to notice that something about her was mysterious. She spoke with confidence, but never talked much about her work. Her manners were polished, her clothes simple yet costly, the kind that hinted at another world. Still, he told himself it did not matter. He liked her kindness and her honesty with his daughter. That was enough for him. One afternoon, as they were packing up after fixing a delivery van, a group of customers passed by holding their phones. They were talking excitedly about something they had seen online. When one of them showed Ethan the screen, his heart stopped for a moment. There on the news page was Claire's picture, dressed in a suit at a business event, standing beside city mayors and investors. The headline said, Donovan Industries had just announced a major new project. The name hit Ethan like a shock. He turned to look at her and she froze. There was no use hiding anymore. Claire tried to speak, but he stepped back, his face hard and quiet. He asked if it was true. She nodded slowly. The small town around them seemed to fall silent. Lily came running, excited to show Claire another drawing, but stopped when she saw her father's face. You could have told me, Ethan said, his voice low, but filled with pain. Was it all a game for you? Playing at being ordinary? Claire shook her head quickly. Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain. She said she had not meant to lie, that she only wanted to be seen for herself and not her money, wanted to start fresh, away from people who feared or flattered her. But Ethan could only hear the sound of the truth crashing down on everything he had started to believe. He turned away and wiped his hands, a habit he did when angry or hurt. You say you wanted honesty, he said, but how honest is pretending to be someone else? Claire stood there helpless, holding back tears. She wanted to reach out to him, but she saw the distance in his eyes. Lily tugged at her father's arm, asking softly what was wrong. He picked her up and whispered that everything would be fine. When he looked back at Claire, his expression was tired, like a man who had worked too many long days without rest. Maybe you should go, he said gently. This place is real small, and small places don't mix well with big secrets. She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. She nodded, whispered goodbye to Lily, and walked to her car. As she drove away, tears blurred the road ahead. The garage grew smaller in her mirror until she could not see it anymore. Her chest hurt almost as much as it had that night in the storm. That evening, Ethan sat alone by the window, watching the quiet street. Lily had gone to bed early. The house felt empty again. Thought about Claire's laughter, the way she had listened to Lily's stories, the way she had made their small world seem brighter. He wondered if he had been too harsh. But each time he remembered her face on that news story, a wall of pride kept him still. In her city apartment, Claire sat by her window, staring at the lights below. For the first time in her life, her success meant nothing. She had built an empire of truth in numbers and contracts. Yet she had lost something far greater because she had hidden the truth about who she was. She told herself she would not try to see Ethan again, though her heart cried for him and the little girl who had made her smile like the sun. The night stretched long for them both, full of silence and regret. Neither of them knew it yet, but the story that had started with rain and bravery was not over. Life had more tests, and another chance waiting just beyond the horizon. Several months passed after Claire left the small town. The days turned colder as autumn touched the leaves with gold and red. Ethan worked quietly in his garage, fixing cars and pretending his heart was fine. He told himself it was better this way. Claire belonged to a world of boardrooms and contracts, not to a mechanic and his little girl. Yet sometimes when the wind blew through the open door of the shop, he could almost hear her laugh again. Lily remembered her too. She would draw pictures of 3 people and keep them on the fridge, saying maybe one day Miss Claire would visit again. Ethan would only smile and say time would tell. Far away in the city, Claire followed her busy routine, but found no joy in it. The skyscrapers felt taller and colder, her success hollow. She remembered the sound of the small garage, the smell of oil, and the simple way Ethan had looked at her without judgment. Her company was preparing a grand charity event, an idea she had started before but never given much heart to. Now she decided it would have a new purpose. The foundation would help fund training for small-town workers and teach young people trades, including auto repair. It would give new chances to those who worked hard but lacked support. She thought of Ethan and Lily with every detail she planned. When the night of the event arrived, the hall was bright with music and voices. She told the crowd that months ago she had nearly lost her life but had been saved by a man who asked nothing in return. The audience grew silent. Her voice shook slightly, but she continued, saying that sometimes the people who fix the world do not wear suits. They wear oil-stained shirts and carry hearts far stronger than gold. When she finished, the room burst into applause, but Claire's eyes searched the crowd for one face alone. Ethan had not planned to be there. A letter had arrived at his shop a week before with no sender named, only an invitation to a community award event in the city. He had almost thrown it away, thinking it was an error, but something in the handwriting made him pause. For a moment, everything around them faded: the applause, the lights, even the noise of cameras. She walked slowly toward him. He stood still, not trusting what he felt. When she stopped in front of him, they both spoke at once, and then laughed through the tension. Claire took a soft breath and said she had made many mistakes, but had learned more in these months than in all her years of success. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then said that he had missed her. He told her he had been angry, but mostly because he cared more than he wanted to admit. Lily still talked about her each week. Claire smiled at that and asked softly if she could see Lily again. Ethan nodded, a small smile breaking through his usual calm. A few days later, Claire visited the small town once more. Lily saw her from the window and ran outside shouting her name. Claire dropped to her knees and hugged the child tight. Ethan stood by the gate watching them, his chest full of warmth he could no longer hide. She joined them for dinner, laughing as Lily told stories and asked endless questions about the big city. The evening felt peaceful, and the house glowed with life. After Lily went to bed, Ethan and Claire stepped out to the porch. The night air smelled of pine and faint smoke from nearby chimneys. The sky stretched wide, bright with stars. Claire looked up and whispered that she never wanted to pretend again. He said softly that he fixed cars, not hearts, but he could try with hers if she would let him. She smiled and leaned slightly closer. The distance that had once held them apart faded like mist. In that quiet moment, it did not matter who had more or less. What mattered was what they had both gained: a second chance born from courage and truth. The house behind them stood warm and glowing, and from inside came the gentle sound of Lily's laughter as she dreamed. For the first time in a long while, all three hearts beat in the same rhythm, not of power or pride, but of love that had finally found its way home.